Shoot day is the whole reason that I got into this career. There are few things more exciting to me than having a camera in hand and capturing powerful images. There's more to it though than just pointing and hitting record. You need to understand all the elements that go into the story to make sure that you capture everything that you're going to need to tell the story that you want in your edit. Today we're going to dig into all the pieces of shoot day to better prepare you for telling your next story. Welcome to Smartphone Storytellers, where it's my personal goal to give you the skills that you need to tell powerful visual stories using the smartphone you already own. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to get regular videos talking through everything from the techniques to the gear that you're going to be using. September is for storytelling is going on all through the month, and each week we're focusing on a different element of telling a great story. It's kind of like Toyotathon or Honda Days, but for stories. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the Smartphone Storytellers Facebook or Instagram pages to enter to win some swag in the form of a hat and some stickers. Over here on YouTube though, we're giving away a filmmaking kit to one lucky winner. That includes a Rode Wireless ME, an APUTURE 60XS, as well as a Lightdome Mini SE, an Alonzi grip, and an 80-inch tripod. Throw in your smartphone and you've got the basic elements that you need to tell a story and take it to the next level. Last week we talked about the pre-production that goes into telling your story, and this week we put that work into action. There's two types of shoot settings that we're going to look at, capturing B-roll and filming an interview or a talking head segment. Not all projects use both of these, but if you have a basic understanding of these pieces, then you're equipped to tell a story. First, let's talk a little bit of philosophy of how I cover events. The first thing I do is I want to make sure that I'm as unobtrusive as possible. This is the reason that so many creative filmmakers wear black. Plus, it's pretty stylish. If you're filming in a darker space, the black clothing helps you to blend in just a little bit more. It doesn't catch as much light, so people aren't as drawn to looking at you. Next, you want to make sure that you're not being obtrusive when capturing the footage. Ideally, you're just capturing the moment that's already happening. There certainly is going to be moments where someone's going to notice you and they're going to look at you and you're going to get a shot of them kind of cheesing the camera. But ideally, you're capturing what's already happening at the event. One way I try to do this is by using longer lenses when filming. Now I will admit, that is a little bit harder when you're using a smartphone, as the zoomed in lenses don't perform as well in low light environments. But if you're able to, then it's worth trying those lenses out. If you can't do that though, then try to at least keep your distractions to a minimum. Next, make sure you're thinking through the story. You've already mentally tracked your story in pre-production, right? So now you're just keeping that in mind as you capture the footage. This way you know what kind of shots you're going to need for your edit. I always like to shoot a little bit extra just to be safe. And if you see a moment that you didn't really plan for, it doesn't hurt to catch it. But ideally, you're looking for the moments that help to illustrate the story that you're telling, the one that you've already worked through in pre-production. Check out last week's video for more of an in-depth look at what kinds of shots I'm talking about. Before you film, you need to make sure you have the gear ready for the shoot. We're not going to talk specifics of models and all of that, but I'm at least going to outline some of the gear I tend to bring on these types of shoots. For specifics, check out my video on the gear I took to Brazil earlier this summer. First, you need a camera, obviously. Per usual, this one's easy. It's your smartphone. Make sure you have what app you like, but there's quite a few options and they all work great. If you're capturing an interview, you're going to want to make sure that you've got an audio source. This could be a lapel microphone, a shotgun microphone, or even the on-camera microphones. They all work great in certain situations, but ideally, you're going to use something that can be wireless and you can use at a distance. The closer to the audio source your microphone can be, the better. Next, if you're filming an interview, then you want to make sure you're considering lighting. This can be just using the available lighting already in the space, or it could be a situation where you're adding in your own extra lights to set up a spot that might not work with existing lighting. This is too deep of a topic to go into on this video, but make sure you're considering both the quality of the lighting as well as the color temperature of that lighting. You don't want to mix two different color temperatures of lighting. Some situations it works, but most it doesn't. You can see more of this when I talked about using the lighting that you already own, a video I did earlier in the channel, but I'm hoping to do some deeper lighting breakdowns in the future. When you're filming, shaky video can be a very real problem. Smartphones have great stabilization features built in, but they're not perfect. When I'm filming handheld, I like to have a grip relocator to have a better handle on my phone. This helps me to give the phone more of a traditional camera feel and keeps things a little bit more stable. Additionally, if I'm filming an interview, I like to put the phone on a tripod. It just makes it so much easier. This keeps the focus on the content that the talent is saying, since holding the phone stable for a longer interview can get tiring and a little bit sloppy as you move around as you get more tired. It just doesn't work great. There's some solid rules to filming, but keep in mind that rules are made to be broken. That being said, it's important to at least understand the rules so you can figure out when it's the right time to change things up and break those rules. That's where we're going to briefly focus on the ideal settings for filming. If you're filming in the stock phone application, it's going to handle a lot of these things for you. But if you're using something like Filmic Pro, Blackmagic Camera app, or Cinema P3, then you've got full control over most of these. I dove into a little bit about Cinema P3 a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to be talking about the Blackmagic Camera app pretty soon. First, make sure your resolution's set where you want it to be. I typically film at 4K on my phone, but that's because I know I have the space to work with and the phone that'll handle it. If you're working with a phone with less storage though, or if it doesn't have the ability to shoot 4K, then 1080p is going to work great. Next, frame rate's going to depend on what you're filming. 24 frames a second is the cinematic frame rate, so I like to edit all of my projects in that frame rate. If I'm filming B-roll though, I often like to film that at 60 frames per second, but then convert it down to 24 frames per second. This creates a nice slow motion shot that helps me to stay in the moment and feel the emotion of what's going on. That being said, it can look weird when people are talking in slow motion, so you want to judge what frame it's going to be right for you. You can also film in the slow motion setting on your phone, but this handles things slightly differently. Play around with that mode before you commit to using it on a shoot. If you have full manual settings on your phone, you're going to want to check your shutter speed, your ISO, your iris, and your white balance. Warning, the following is a very simplified overview. Let me stress very. Shutter speed should be double whatever your frame rate is, or 180 degrees. It really depends on the application and how it measures shutter speed. So if you're at 24 frames per second, you should be at 1/48 or 150 depending on what your app will do. If your app measures in degrees though, then 180 degrees is automatically going to figure that out for you. ISO adjusts the sensitivity of the sensor of your camera. You want to keep this number lower, as the higher number means your image might be a little bit noisy. That just means that you're going to have tons of small little particles all over the video that might not look great. Cameras normally have what's called a native ISO, but I'm going to be honest, I haven't been able to find the native ISO on the phone. But the native ISO is basically just when it looks best. Iris will adjust the brightness of your image, but it's also going to change how shallow the depth of focus is going to be. If you want a brighter image with a more shallow depth of field, set it to a lower number. If you want it to be more in focus, then you're going to change it to a higher number. Finally, white balance adjusts how your camera interprets the lighting of the space. If a space is lit by daylight or the sun, then you're going to be around 5600K. If it's lit by tungsten or those orangish bulbs you see around your house at night, then you're going to be around 3200K. If it's a mix or you're using fluorescent lights, you might want to be around 4500K. Ideally though, you're going to set your white balance and not keep it on auto. If it's on auto, the camera's going to continuously change it while you film and make the colors change. This is a very, very simplified look at each of those settings, but you want to make sure you consider how to adjust them when filming. Like I said before, if you use the stock app, a lot of those are handled for you, but other times it's going to make the wrong calls. So manual is best if you understand how to adjust it. Take a look at my Which App Should I Film With video for more information and a deeper dive into Cinema P3 and how all this works. Finally, it's time to look at actually shooting. First, filming B-roll. Anytime I film B-roll, I like to keep the story at the forefront of my mind the whole time, while I'm looking for the moments that are going to help me tell the story. That being said, I find that there's many mini stories to be found at every event. While the full event might have one main story, there are smaller pieces that help to make it up. For instance, if you were telling the story of a reunion, the big story is talking about these people who came together after being apart for so many years. At the event though, you're going to have people in different settings. Maybe some people are playing some games together, while others might be enjoying some food and drinks together. Each of those areas are different mini stories within the event that make up the bigger story. When I'm shooting my B-roll, I want to make sure I get shots to piece together each of those areas to make smaller stories. I break my shots down into 3 main categories: wide, medium, and tight. The wide shots help me to set the stage for where everything's taking place. It helps the viewer to understand the setting and everything that's going on around it and how it all fits together. Then I go in for some of those medium shots. These shots tend to be the majority of what I film. It focuses on the people, the place, the events going on, but it usually is a smaller group of people. Then I grab the tight shots. These are the detail shots. They might be a tighter shot of someone talking or laughing, or maybe it's a tighter shot on an item that's involved in the scene. These shots help the viewer to focus on some of the smaller details that might not have been shown on some of the mediums and wides. Then when I'm in the edit, which we're going to talk a little bit more about next week, I use these types of shots to tell those mini stories I talked about. Each of these shots give a different piece of each of the stories I'm telling and help the viewer to understand the areas that made up the larger event. This doesn't mean that every edit is wide, medium, then tight, wide, medium, tight, and then to repeat it over and over again. It doesn't mean I use every type of shot in every mini story, but it does mean that when I'm in the edit, I have the pieces that I'm trying to cut together to tell the story. The last piece I capture is the interview. This could be a direct-to-camera reporter style shot that's the host telling the story, similar to what you're seeing right now, or it could be an interview with someone who's talking to someone off camera. Both have their place in storytelling, and it all depends on how you want to connect the story to the viewer. For a direct-to-camera shot, I typically have the spokesperson talking directly to the viewer. I call it a reporter style shot because they're working similar to a reporter in a broadcast news story. They're sharing the details of what happened and the main elements of the story. If you look at the video that I shared last week, that was a perfect example of something that could have been this style of video. If I had captured him giving that script on camera, the exact same script, I would have shot it in this way. These shots are often either waist up or mid-chest to the top of the head, and the person's looking directly into the camera like I am now. You want to make sure that the camera is close to eye level and that their eyes are meeting with the lens. Otherwise, it's going to feel a little off to the viewer as it causes them to not connect with the image. As if I was talking to you kind of like this. It just feels a little off, a little weird. For an off-camera interview, I'll have the person typically positioned looking about 30 to 45 degrees to the main camera and then looking just off camera. These are usually people who are more so impacted by the story as opposed to someone directly involved into making it happen, and it's not the spokesperson. Looking again at the video from last week, this would have been great if I had interviewed someone who had received the furniture and supplies and really had been impacted by what that organization was doing. For each of these, you want to make sure the person's in an environment where they're well lit, with controlled sound, and no major visual distractions. I'm sure I sound like a broken record at this point, but I covered a lot of this in my How to Film a Talking Head video. Check it out for more specific details on how to light it, how to frame it, and just what those should look like, and how you can film something like this with no extra lights. There's so many other details that I can go into for each of these things, but I'm not trying to create a YouTube video rivaling the length of the extended editions of Lord of the Rings. They're very long. I eventually hope to dig deeper into a lot of these details, but for now, I hope this gives you some information to help you improve the stories that you're already telling. At the very least, it gives you the basic information to jump in and test some things. Don't forget to enter into this week's contest by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and then answering the question for this week's video. I loved last week's question so much, I'm actually going to ask it again. I want to know, what was the #1 thing that you guys took away from this video? Next week is our last week for September is for storytelling, but the fun's not going to stop there. Remember though, as you tell your stories, it's not about the gear, it's the story that matters.